Closely with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of President Trump and the way he relates to the media, or indeed relates to the public, and his way of off the cuff speaking, and his manner of talking to you as if he's actually talking to you. And you see this in his rallies. He talks directly to the people. There could be just one or two people in the room, or there could be 100 or 100,000, but he has this direct way of talking. I think it's quite refreshing. And you are hearing the man and what he believes and what he, the policies he wants to pursue because he believes in those policies and believes in those things. You very rarely do you see that in a politician. Like if you look at the way Biden and Obama and those guys talk, Clinton and so on, you're looking at they're reading off a teleprompter. They've got a prepared speech. Someone's written that speech for them. They maybe likely understand nothing of what they're reading, but they're reading a speech. They've practiced it. They've rehearsed it in front of the cameras. They've got spin doctors saying, "No, look." Look, Barack, now remember when you mention this word here, we want you to put emphasis on that word, and then look to the left. Okay, then look ahead here. And so it's choreographed and scripted down to the nth degree. This is presented, and Obama was a decent speaker, by the way. And this is presented as being the authentic politician. In fact, there's nothing of the sort. There's nothing that Obama or again Biden or any of those guys mentioned or spoke about in their speeches that wasn't prepared by spin doctors and again rehearsed and choreographed and so on. So the idea that that's the authentic way of speaking and that's the authentic way of presenting ideas and policies is absurd in my mind. It's a perversion. Whereas when President Trump speaks directly as he would, without notes, without any preparation, without a teleprompter and without a script in front of him, and when he talks, then he's attacked and lambasted, and look how erratic he is, he's unpredictable, he's all over, blah, 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 without conceding that he's spoken for, answered many questions or spoken for hours. Just off the cuff, without any preparation, without any pre-rehearsed Q&A, and the amount of supposed interviews that politicians go into with media, where the sit-down interviews, every question is pre-agreed. The answers are rehearsed. The questions are, the media outlet has to agree to okay, you'll stick to these questions and only to these questions, and so that the politician can rehearse the answers, often spending many days in rehearsal and choreography and so on. And again, in front of the camera, how to look, the expression on the face when you answer this or that, and can you show some gravitas when you talk about these sorts of things. Trump doesn't do any of that, or if he does, it's a great deal less than any of the others. And given the amount of times that he just takes questions from the media without any preparation, just rando picks journalists to say, yep, what's your question, and answers it. But because he doesn't give a soundbite answer that a pre-rehearsed piece of choreography would deliver from a different politician, then he's look at the way he talks. Now, I've been to lunches and dinners and so on with senior public servants here in Australia, and they they lambast Trump for this and say he's not slick and rehearsed. Well, that's because he hasn't rehearsed it. You're actually talking to the man, what he believes. You're not talking to a speech writer and a spin doctor choreographer. Why do you think the speech writing and the spin doctor choreography version of a politician is better than Trump? Because it sounds crisp and cleaner. Or something. I mean, what? I mean, it could be a whole bunch of lies. I mean, why is one considered the effective way to communicate? Because you're not communicating to the politician, you're talking to the machine behind them. And I think Trump is the genuine, or far more than these other guys, at least, the genuine article. And that, I mean, and again, if you're talking, some of those rallies, in the presidential campaign, some of those rallies, Trump was talking for quite a while, and he'd go off and go and do another one, some across the other side of the country. Now, to do that, you've got to be able to think pretty clearly. For someone, such as myself, that's done a lot of international business traveling and had to make speeches and talks typically about products and technology and things like that. So the script was kind of pre-decided for me, given that that's what I was talking about. Nonetheless, you don't know what questions will come at you and how the audience might respond and so on. But nonetheless, so this idea that just because you're dealing with the man and he talks directly to you, that means he's erratic and unpredictable or somehow a danger to democracy, as the globalist controlled media tries to depict him as, is an outrage. And on top of that, they heavily edit and cherry pick. For example, President Trump made a speech about some of the fraud that's been uncovered, USAID and Doge and all that sort of business going on, and he laid out some clear examples. But when it was reported in the very left-leaning media here in Australia, it was a conspiracy theory put forward by Trump, as they call him, and there was no mention of the examples and the evidence that he gave. So they were able to say, and Trump just made the conspiracy theories without evidence. And well, that's simply not true. A, it's not a conspiracy theory. It actually has happened. That money has been wholesale stolen and looted from the taxpayer. And B, there are clear examples of it that are clearly stated in the public domain. So why are you lying so much about it? And because they just want to make the President Trump look bad. Now, I wince a little when the president does that. This person-to-person way he has of dealing and interfacing with the media, because I know they're going to use it against him, and I know they're going to use it as an attack line. And their talking point of he's unpredictable, he's erratic, and this. I don't agree with any of that. I think that's nonsense. Given you're dealing with the man and his policies, I think he's incredibly consistent throughout the election campaign. He was clearly stating his policies and his policy platform. The whys and the wherefores, the benefits, all of that very clearly stated. And he was the only politician doing that, by the way. And once in public, once in the White House, then President Trump was acting out those policies, and again being very, very clear about it. So this pretend, fake, confected outrage that the globalist goons and their stooges are using is all bullshit. And I believe you can just dismiss out of hand those criticisms. But again, I think he makes himself an easy target for those that want to, maliciously misrepresent his manner of communicating. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you look at how the businessman, and again, he's not a creature from the political swamp of Washington. That needs to be recognised. Nor do you really want that. I mean, do you? If he was in say, running one of his businesses, as an example, and he would come into the room, there'd be a meeting with maybe the managers and other executives in the business, and he would talk directly to them. Well, this is a problem. What are we going to do about this? Well, I just want to let you know my thoughts on such and such. And so that manner of communicating, with some modifications, being carried across into the political sphere. I find it refreshing because I know I'm dealing with the guy. I'm hearing him, his policies, his views, and I think that's refreshing. Now, I noticed that when say Harry Truman, the president of the United States at the end of World War II, became president after the death of Franklin Roosevelt, he would sometimes, like, he'd be walking along in Washington DC or wherever he was, and the media would bail him up with questions and this sort of thing, and he would do that. And he had a folksy way of talking. This was in the pre-television era, really, so you didn't have TV cameras roaming around and jumping all over you or ambushing you or something like that. So it was a different time. And the polished, if you look at really John Kennedy was the beginning of the polished speechwriter, and whether or not that reflected any of Kennedy's views or not was quite another matter. but and Kennedy was very good at delivering speeches. Some of those speeches were very good. Even today, you can listen to some of Kennedy's speeches, again with his oratory and delivery, and wow, that's a moving speech. That was a good speech. Now, whether Kennedy did or didn't believe any of it, it's much harder to say. I would say not. I mean, maybe some of the things, but really, he wanted to move people with his oratory, with the speech. And his believing in it or not believing it or being part of his policies, that was quite incidental. And if anything, if you look at the policies that he was talking about inside the White House and the speeches he was making, there's not, they were rather discordant, I thought. Now, interestingly, Richard Nixon, he had speechwriters too, but in Nixon's, that he would often get hold of the speech, saying, "No, that doesn't fully reflect my views," and he would rewrite parts of it, much to the sort of his handlers and his advisors around him were always wringing their hands in anxiety when he did that. But you still got a decent idea of him, the man, and his views and his policies and his determination of priorities and things like that. That would still come through. That was, I would argue Nixon was probably the last one where you ever saw that. From then on, it was professional speechwriters, some of whom were good, some not. Some of the speeches don't age well. Like Reagan's speech, to the enemies of freedom, this sort of stuff. And that's got a certain resonance to it. But again, it was all show. Whether Reagan did or didn't believe any of it or even understood it's another matter. Now, in terms of local politicians in Australia, there are two where there was a senior federal politician was making a speech on a factory that was being opened, and I was invited to the factory opening, and so I was there. Got a front row seat actually to the politician's speech. And it was quite clear that he was reading a speech that he understood nothing of it. Now, he was meant to be the politician in charge of industry or factories or something like that, but and so you think he would have been across some of the issues, but it's quite clear just watching him deliver the speech, he didn't have a fucking clue what it was. And just like if you look over the guy's shoulder, it's in quite large type, the speech, and then it's there's so many. There's a sort of a line or a paragraph, look up, look to the right, look to the left. So it's not only a speech; it's got choreography within it as well. I don't know if this guy got to rehearse that particular speech beforehand, because there was it just looked like he was just that little bit uncomfortable with it, suggesting that it was thrust into his hand sort of only minutes before. But I don't know. Maybe he had one quick rehearsal. Anyway, he was. I got a chance, among others, to have a quick chat to him afterwards, and my thoughts were confirmed. He didn't have a clue, hadn't got a single clue what he was talking about. Now, this again is a divide between a professional politician with speechwriters and choreographers and someone like President Trump. With Trump, you're actually dealing with the guy. Not that he doesn't have advisors. Not that some of his speeches won't be written for him, or not that those things will never or could have, but that you are dealing with the genuine article. Whereas in the case of this politician, he was reading a speech that someone else had written, and he had no idea not even a clue of what he was talking about. And that was, I thought that was rather disappointing. I mean, wouldn't he want to come to grips with some of the issues? It's part of his portfolio of responsibility. And yet he didn't know. The impression I got was he didn't give a shit either, by the way. Now, in another instance, I was at a function in a regional parliament, like an equivalent of a sort of a state governor's parliament, that sort of thing. And I was standing, some guys came along and sort of set up this like little sort of small stage, like a portable stage. It came in and plunked it down, and I was thinking, like, what's going on here? And then the governor, the state governor, or the Australian equivalent of it, came in, and we call him a premier here. And the guy got up on this impromptu sort of stage and started reading a speech about, I think it was like advanced technology, that sort of stuff. And this guy had rehearsed it, so he'd had a couple of goes at it, and he was a pretty polished operator, and there was something about his presence that sort of projected confidence and that sort of thing. But again, the guy had no idea, not a clue of what he was talking about. The speech was written, the choreography was done, and the same sort of thing of, look up, look left, look right. So the choreography was built into the speech. But again, afterwards, I didn't. There were security people around it, but he came in. I was standing almost right next to the stage, and a couple of security guys were there, and in fact, it's more than that. I think it must be 3 or 4. And he was there yakking away right next to me. But afterwards, and I didn't get to speak directly to him. He was in sort of a group of people talking, but it was again abundantly clear he had no idea what he was talking about, not even the remotest clue. But he was making the speech. Now, so I want to, part of this essay here is to draw the distinction between someone you're really talking to, who's really telling you what they believe, and they're communicating to you directly in a person-to-person sense, or the very detached, aloof politician that is simply reciting a speech written for them by someone else, of which they have even not the slightest understanding of what they're talking about or what the speech is. And I would prefer the genuine article, which I believe you get with President Trump. You've been with Tacit Australia, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.